You go up Mount Everest? Maybe. The mall? Maybe not so much. Is it possible we could live without Scotch-guarded carpets? Could we go back to what our parents did, which was to wash the carpet? It's possible. And as I'm happy to report that last year we had our first meeting with the carpet industry. 8 carpet manufacturers in this country produce 93% of the carpets, and they all use this material. And they become more and more aware of what the danger of this chemical is, and they get more and more uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, they said, well, what happens if we all just agreed to phase it out, a phase-out date? And I'm happy to report a year later, they went back, and they're talking about implementing a phase-out date in the next 5 years to remove it from all carpets. That would be remarkable if it happened, but I don't know. It's, there's still, they're doing it because they, most companies do the right thing. They're people like us, they have children, and they just had no knowledge of this. Nobody told them that was going to be a probability, and now that they see it, there's threat of lawsuits, surely, but there's also just doing the right thing. And 9 out of 10 companies will do the right thing, just like your friends. 9 out of 10 of them you trust, 1 of them you're not so sure. And so this is the same sort of thing you'll find with companies. They mostly do the right thing if brought to task and held to accountable. So that's what we do. Science can derive policy. PFAS is something you want to be aware of. It's going to be in the newspaper more and more. Indiana hasn't looked for it. I bet you if there's any military bases here, whoops, there are 6 of them. If there are any landfills here, whoops, there are thousands of them. If there's any consumer products here, we've got personal care products, we've got all sorts of other things. Industrial uses of it are high in lots of areas. And we're going to talk about it. Most of the chemicals are good. I'm not after chemical industries, except one of them. And some are not. Thank you very much for your attention. Emails on the bottom.
Maybe I'll start. As I said in the opening, pollutant in the Clean Water Act is defined really broadly. It's basically anything added to a waterway that wasn't there to begin with. When you start getting into the sort of nitty-gritty of the way that discharge permits are issued, the way that monitoring is done, you start to see agencies that kind of slice and look for particular things. So you can look at different classes of industrial discharger. We'll have to monitor for some pollutants, specific chemicals or chemical compounds, and we'll have to control for a smaller subset of that. And it really depends on what you're looking at in the water discharge world. I think I'll let maybe the scientists on the panel speak to how sort of scientists view the word pollutant. But from a legal perspective, it starts out really broad in the law, but then gets really narrowed when you talk about a specific type of discharger.
There are lots of pollutants. If you get up every morning and listen to the news, you're going to die from something because there's always in the news about some new pollutant, right? How do you keep track of all these things? And what you need to do is prioritize, like everything in your life. What's the worst thing? And in northern Indiana, agricultural waste is big. New York City, not so big. Okay, but there are different aspects of industry. Northern Indiana's got a lot of industry. Well, that's interesting. You have the sort of trifecta of everything that could possibly go wrong. And you don't need to know all the science. Some is helpful, but recognize that when scientists get together and say global warming's a threat, that could be a threat. Okay, it's not imminent, but it's a threat. Whereas some of these other things are imminent and in your backyard. And nobody's going to read them, tell you what they are, but people are around that have this information. And there are websites and public information things that will tell you the relative merits or the relative worries of these threats. And I think that self-education education's power. Just figure out if people are talking about a substance or a smell or a taste, why should it be there and why shouldn't it be there? And you might be horrified to find out that something is there that you didn't expect. But you can live with it, you can work around it, you can get rid of it by community actions or laws or some types of devices, and that's how you survive. I mean, we're all going to die. We don't want to die early, and this is the idea that we can minimize our exposure. And I think there's lots of information out there. Information is key in this case, and telling other people about it as well.
Normally, I don't tell people to think like a lawyer. It's rough business, but in this case, it's really important because, as you were saying, as Robert was saying, the Clean Water Act defines pollutants really broadly, and so often you'll get permitting for one kind of discharge, but not things that people wouldn't think of as discharge. So we're talking about sediments. We're talking about rocks. Those kinds of things. So if you are next to a factory or a factory farm, and suddenly your waterways are polluted with sediment or rocks, look into their permit and see if they're allowed to do that, because that's a way to kind of attack them from other things that they may do in the future. I just wanted to throw that out there. There's a lot going on there. So is there a way to treat the waste better? Yes. I mean, we can line pits. We can look into have much stronger monitoring requirements. We can move to different forms of agriculture that aren't so damaging to the environment. Those are all things we could do. In terms of large agribusiness, they do support each other, but in terms of whether Monsanto is like a leading cause of factory farms, I mean, it's debatable. But the industry developed starting in the 70s, and there's a lot of factors in play. Was the USDA like CAFO management in terms of clean water and clean air, not so much. They're more monitoring like meats. But citizen support is vital. So here are two things that can be done. One, you can monitor your land, so like if you're or help people monitor their land if they're adjacent to CAFOs. So monitor their water quality, monitor if they're next to a river, you can monitor what's going into that river. That's very helpful. The second thing you can do is while we're struggling at the state level, every county has a board of zoning appeals, or like a BZA, and they've got their own zoning laws. And what you can do is you can have stricter requirements or even not allow CAFOs in a county. So if you're in a county, Porter County actually had this fight a few years back. But if you're in a county where you're really concerned about this issue, I would encourage you to support stricter regulations of CAFOs at the Board of Zoning level, so that the BZA has the ability to say no to CAFOs even if IDEM won't. That is something that citizens can do and have done that has been extremely effective in this state.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said,
Thank you. So we have a 10-minute break before our keynote speaker. So if you want to stretch, get something to drink, the restrooms are out there. But we will have him start at 10:15. We'll stay on time. Our time.